Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chair White, for your attendance here today and letting us have some time with you. Mr. Stivers and Mr. Ross touched on the money market fund. I just want to touch on that a little bit. Can you tell us where the SEC stands right now with respect to the final rule, when we might be seeing that coming out?
I can tell you that it is in active discussion between the staff and the commissioners in terms of a final rule. I would expect it to reach a final stage in the near term. I don't want to be more specific than that, but we're working very hard on it. It's an extraordinarily important rulemaking, and I expect it to be in the near term of the fiscal year.
And you're not willing to define near term for us today?
I'm not willing to define it any further than that. I'm not sure I've used that phrase with other things yet, but I would expect it to be in the next I better leave it at near term.
Can you tell us whether the Commission is taking into account the report language included in the recent omnibus that directs the SEC to consider how any proposal would impact borrowing costs on businesses and local governments and returns for investors?
No question that this rule is taking into account those impacts or potential impacts, other costs, other benefits, obviously, but our economists have been working on this rule for a very long time, these sets of issues, and continue to do so. In fact, we put some recent studies into the comment fund.
One of the things I read recently was that between 1985 and 2008, people who used money market funds, whether they be small businesses, pensions, counties, cities, municipalities, in the aggregate have earned $450 billion more than they otherwise would have by virtue of having the money market funds there. And there is considerable concern with the floating NAV proposals, and I think you received 1,442 comments on the proposed rule. 1,387 were opposed. That's 96% opposed to the floating NAV proposal. And I look back at an additional $450 billion that could have gone to investors, savers, counties, municipalities, and that, to me, that would be a concern, and I'm wondering if the SEC shares those concerns.
The SEC certainly is looking and taking seriously all of those comments, all of the possible, impacts from whatever final rule we agree upon. It's being, I think we study all the comments in every one of our rulemakings, but this is one the SEC has been studying for a very long time and very deeply, and we continue to do it.
Mr. Pittenger talked a little bit about some cost-benefit analysis that the SEC may engage in, and I think he raised a point about different-sized entities, and I think you responded something to the effect of that you're trying to be cost-effective, generally speaking. I guess my follow-up question to that is, does the SEC take a look at a regulation and analyze its impact on the ability for a large firm to comply, and then separately analyze the ability of a small firm to comply?
We do look at it in those ways, and we also look for ways in all of our other, requirements, whether it be our disclosure regime, or as we think about the possibly doing the tick size pilot. I mean, we're constantly thinking in those directions.
What about taking into account particular regulations' impact on jobs and wages? Is there a specific analysis of that? And I'm not talking about a job that might be created because somebody has to hire somebody to comply with the regulation.
Yeah, the answer is we look at all. I'd have to see how formalized those factors are, but we do look at all of the impacts from our rules. I mean, so. But I probably ought to respond further with more specificity.
And specifically with respect to jobs and wages, because we see insufficient job growth out there and insufficient wage growth. Also, the impact, I'm wondering if you look at how a regulation may impact on investor choice and liquidity.
We certainly do look at that.
Okay. I thank you for being here today. I yield back my time.